So thanks very much for joining our virtual boardroom today. My name is Jo Thompson and I work for HR Recruit. With me today is Marion Hewitt, and she's going to be facilitating the boardroom about what exactly is a coaching conversation. So I will hand you over to Marion now, and yeah, we'll make a start.
Thank you. Yeah, if you just give me the screen share, that'd be great. So yeah, this feels quite a big conversation to cover and discuss in 45 minutes, but we will have a good go at it. So let's just see what we're doing. So I was thinking, what do we mean by coaching conversation? We often hear about managers having a coaching approach and coaching cultures and all that side of it. But when we actually think about, what do we mean by coaching? I've used this quote a few times with training. One day Alice came to a fork in the road and saw a Cheshire cat in a tree. Which road do I take? She asked. Where do you want to go? Was his response. I don't know, Alice. I don't know, Alice answered. Then said the cat, it doesn't matter. And recognizing that actually, if we haven't worked out where we're trying to get to, it doesn't matter how we get there. So when we're talking about coaching, we talk a lot about goals and, how to get there and the plan and, how we know when we've got there, how we're going to measure success, how will we know when we've passed, particularly when we're looking in work situations and we're talking about performance and all those sorts of things. Actually having clear recognition of what that all is about, what is the goal, what's the plan to get to that goal and how will we get there, are all different things that we need to consider. This is probably one of the most well-known definitions of coaching. Sir John Whitmore was coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their growth, which it's a pretty good summary, so I'm not going to argue with that one. What I thought we'd start by thinking about is what is coaching and what isn't, what it's not. So we're going to have a chat in rooms, and I would like us to start by thinking about, we're talking about a coaching conversation, but actually, how do you describe a coaching conversation? What is coaching, and then what isn't it? So, the things that would come to mind initially for coaching is that it's forward thinking, and what it's not judgmental. So I'll put you into, well, at least I will put you into groups, but I haven't got breakout rooms showing. Joe, could you give me breakout rooms, please? Thank you very much. So, all right, I'm going to put you into 3 groups. So you're a bit about 8, and that's the hope that people that are currently on mute and behind camera will be comfortable to join in those conversations. So just build up a couple of lists, what is coaching and what isn't it, and see what lists we come back with. Good conversations, everybody? Yeah. So one of the groups, let me see where are the groups. So the group 2, that was the group that Joe was in, so Amanda, John. So coaching is, what did you put in? How would you have finished that sentence? What did your conversation cover?
Okay, I didn't contribute much, but I did write quite a lot down. So if everyone's happy for me to speak, I'll do that. So we came up with coaching is about asking questions. It's about engaging the person who's being coached into a natural conversation. It's about helping the coachee come to their own answer themselves. It's about getting people to realise their potential, holding space for them while they're able to sort of work through that journey to get to whatever the goal is at the end. And it's about a creation of a psychologically safe space for them to be able to do that, so that you can build up trust with the person who's coaching you.
Thank you. Yeah. There's a message in there. Coaching within the business. So, John, did you want to?
Yeah, happy to. So yeah, hi everyone. So what I've got in the business is we're rolling out a coaching program. Within there is 3 offerings. One of them is coaching in the moment. So all colleagues, leaders, everybody will be able to start to understand coaching as a leadership style. And then there is another offering, which is for leaders or colleagues who want to be coached themselves. So what I've been speaking to is people across the business. They're saying, that's great, though I don't want to go to my leader or my director, whether it's a personal conflict of interest in that relationship, or what they want to be coached on is quite personal or specific to that relationship. So to sort of combat that, what I've created is an internal bank of coaches to have that to create that safe space, that psychological contract that says, okay, nothing that is said in this environment is going to go back to that director or that line manager, and it is personal to them to go through that coaching rather than moving away from that performance management piece. This is a whatever topic goal that you want to get to. It's about having the coaching to be embedded into the culture. How do we get a coaching culture rather than coaching, grow model, performance related?
Okay, thank you. That's useful. Well, good to know that that's being implemented in your organisation, so it's sort of accessible to everybody. What about if we look at the third group, which was group? Who was in group 3? David, Phil, Rosie. Coaching is not? How were you finishing that sentence? What would you like to add from anybody in that group? Want feedback?
Yeah.
Not giving direction or guidance, letting people find their own answers.
Yeah. Thank you. What else?
Creating rapport and ensuring that people have the opportunity to change their perspectives around what it is they're trying to deal with.
Thank you. Yeah, seeing different options. The things that I've got listed in terms of thinking of what coaching is, things like forward focus, goal focus. The agenda is usually by the coachee. Outcomes and actions are identified by the coachee. Non-judgmental, solution focused, challenging, non-critical, positive, empowering. And when I say challenging, I mean that within the context of it being a safe space. So you're challenging somebody's thinking to help them find other ideas. And it's not looking backwards. You don't actually have to unpick details of the past to move forward. It's not counselling. It's not directive. It's not limiting in ideas. That's the whole purpose of coaching. It helps you create more options and ideas. It's not mentoring, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's not therapy. It's not giving advice, and it's not problem focused. So some clear things as to what you would be having in a coaching conversation and what you wouldn't. The group that I joined, we were having quite a bit of discussion around the coaching and mentoring angle. And if we look at sort of the continuum, they are the opposite ends. Coaching, as all the things that I've just said, it's non-directive. The agenda is by the coachee, and the person that is coaching doesn't need to have any knowledge of that person's world. Whereas if you are mentoring, it's about guidance, advice based on having a knowledge and understanding of that person's world. So I can coach and mentor somebody in HR, but I could coach engineers, IT people, anybody, because that is a process. And then you have all the things between. But where we were starting to have a conversation, a debate about, is the fact that you could still effectively mentor, but with a coaching approach. There are ways that you can be directive, as in, you could give your advice and help somebody still find their best route, because your version may not necessarily be the only option or the best one, but actually you can contribute through having that experience. So if we think it from that perspective, when is coaching approach appropriate? It may not always be. And I think when we're talking about what is a coaching conversation, let's just think about, when is coaching approach a good approach and when is it not going to be appropriate? So let's go back into those groups and think about when you can use a coaching approach and actually when you might not be able to. There are some situations when you can't. So actually thinking about it, we tend to think of a coaching culture and coaching conversations as being, the best thing ever and always to use, but they have got a huge amount of validity in my opinion, but they're not always something that we can use. So recognizing and thinking about that. Does that sound okay? Happy to go have a chat about that. How are we doing for time? All right, I'll put you back out in your rooms, probably not quite for 10 minutes this time because we'll be running out of time as usual. So I will keep you in the same groups and see you back. I'll give you 8 minutes. Is that all right? So when is a coaching conversation appropriate and when not? I'll see you back after. Quite a debate in the room that I joined around that. When is coaching a good approach? And one of the things that I think there was getting a bit of tied up in is the difference between having a coach as a paid session appointed person where you set goals and all the things, and actually having a coaching approach to a conversation, which are different things. And so we're talking about the topic for today, you know, we said about what exactly is the coaching conversation. It's thinking about that side of it. So what did you come up with as when that it would be an appropriate approach and when it wouldn't? Anybody want to share generally, or can go to a particular group?
John, do you want to share with our group?
Yeah, I don't mind. I feel like I'm like the one that always talks.
Fine. Thank you. I need somebody to, and nobody else wants to.
So we did have like numerous conversations, and I think sort of the consensus is it depends. Yeah, like what do you define as a coaching moment? So and I can only speak in my experience, right? I'm not a guru, but what I find is if the team's coming to me, the way that I find is the best, and how in my world it operates is it got to do with them and their job objectives and whatever project that they're working on? What is the bigger picture, the impact that that's having, versus are you coming to me for a strategic reason? So is it that you're wanting to know, yeah, what it is this something to do with you or the business? If it is you and what you're working on, then that's a coachable moment. If you're after strategic, well, then that's when I need to intervene. And that's not a coaching moment because that's quite dangerous,
Yeah.
territory. But yeah, that's my input.
Thank you. So what about one of the other groups? So you were group 2, weren't you? What about group 1? What did you come up with? That was where that was Ben, Claire, Greg. Anything particularly you want to add?
I'm happy to jump in and share what others shared because I found it useful. So the general consensus was that coaching can be a good way to start any conversation if it's open, but not if you are, for example, giving performance review feedback. That might not be the appropriate time to do it in a coaching way, because if you need to give direct feedback, the sense I got from that, and Ben can jump in if he wants to, was that that would usually be in the context of maybe not such positive feedback. But one of the things that Ben shared was not coaching too early, so giving people a chance to settle into their role and learn before you start that coaching phase. But one of the situations not to use coaching in was anything that was around safety or compliance, because they don't usually give you the luxury of having that lengthy conversation that coaching might involve. You need a sort of more direct input. Please, the rest of the team, jump in if there's other stuff I haven't relayed.
Yeah, I think that the last one, you know, when you don't use it, if it's something that's time critical, as you say, you know, an emergency situation, or, you know, just needs a quick response, actually you don't then want to start going down the, you know, what are your options and all that sort of thing. Sometimes you just need an answer and it needs to happen quickly. Or yeah, as John was saying, you know, if there's actually just information that's required that, you know, somebody needs to give, then that's not. But actually it's when it's a good way of moving things forward quickly. If you help somebody if you have a constructive conversation with them to identify options, actions, obstacles, barriers, all those things, and then to create a plan so it can move things forward for them, because it can help their thinking. I know, you know, I have a coach, and I find out, you know, I'm going to keep that for my coaching session, and it always helps me unravel things and see different perspectives that I wouldn't get if I was just sitting there trying to work it through on my own.
I think
so that's really
a gentleman was talking on our group, but it was really interesting. But unfortunately, we got thrown out. I can't remember who it was, but he was saying that in his company, you know, frequency. So you might do quite frequent one-to-ones and then back them up with more formalized check-ins. And I think that's a really good way of keeping that kind of coaching journey alive. In a fairly structured way, but in a safe environment rather than a formal appraisal.
Yeah, I was reflecting on the comments about giving feedback, and I'm trying to think that there's still elements as to how you can use a coaching approach to that. So if you're giving feedback, so if somebody's delivered something, you could go to them and say, right, I think this, this, and this, or you can go to them and say, how do you feel that went? If you were doing it again, what have you learned from that experience? And then you can possibly, you could add in your perspective, or saying if you're would you like me to give some observations from my, so you can then add it in. But the whole approach is a much more collaborative coaching approach, rather than right, this is what I saw, this is what you need to do differently next time, because it lands very differently.
I'll always remember my first boss years ago, when I came to him with a problem. I was like, how do we solve this problem? And he was like, don't come to me with that question. Come to me with the problem, with a couple of solutions, and we'll talk them through. Best advice I've ever learned.
And I think that's a brilliant example of a coaching approach, because a coaching approach teaches people to think for themselves, and it's a long-term saving for the coach, because it encourages people to feel empowered to think things through. So they don't, if somebody comes to me, ask the question and I answer it, then where's the learning in that? But if you go through that, what are your options, what are the obstacles, what are the pros and cons, and agree an outcome. Might take longer in that moment, but actually they might do it on their own the next time. So I think it's also brilliant for empowering, it's for building confidence, it's part of a development approach. You don't need to be a subject matter expert on it. So if somebody's got a problem in their particular area, you can coach them through it, whereas you might not have the technical knowledge. So I think there's lots of times when it is appropriate, but recognizing it isn't always. So I think the final thing, can we go to 20 past, Joe? Well, just 5 minutes to just really bring together what we think makes a good conversation. If you had a conversation with somebody and you thought actually that was a really good example of a coaching conversation, how would you describe it? What are all the skills they'd have used? What did it feel like? What were the outcomes? If you had to write a list of things, I've created a list here so match it with yours in a few minutes. So we'll have to think fast on this one to share the ideas back. So I'll give you 5 minutes on that one. So what makes a great coaching conversation? And I'll see you back after. So I'm looking for a rapid fire long list from each group in the few minutes we've got left. So which group should we start with? Shall we start with room one, which was Inga, Greg, Ben? Oh, Ben's having to go. Okay, that's fine. Sorry, nice to see you. Let you off the hook on this one. Anybody else from that group like to?
I'll start off with some. We spoke about boundary settings at the beginning. How do you start off a session? We mentioned it's important. It's not a one-way thing. It's got to be a two-way discussion. We also spoke about where and how you have your meeting, because before COVID, we probably had a chance to be face-to-face. Now it's virtual, but where and how you set it up and the timing of setting it up. Those are three. There were some more, but I'll let someone else talk.
Thank you. The only one I would slightly challenge is in terms of the joint, about it being a conversation, not one way. I would argue that the actual considerable balance should be in favour of the coachee rather than the person doing the coaching. So you should be looking at sort of 80-20, 70-30 split would be what I'd be looking for. Right. From the other groups, what particular things? Thank you, Greg. Thank you for the contribution.
So do you want to share some things from our group? You've raised a couple of good points.
Yeah, so I said that predominantly to what makes a great conversation is about listening. So it's predominantly about the listening, whether it's the coachee or the coach that's doing that, and also about taking the emotions out, because quite often, depending on what the topic may be or wherever it's leading, there can be some emotions, certainly when you're trying to coach leaders or business leaders, and if you are able to take the emotions out, then you can actually have a meaningful conversation, which is where you're listening to each other. But where emotions get involved, there's very little listening that's happening, so you're not actually listening to what you're trying to achieve. So that's kind of what we discussed.
Yes, I mean, in recognising, that it's not sort of a counselling or an unpicking. The only time, which actually comes to it quite a lot, is recognising, so whether you call it emotions or not, is the impact of things like limiting beliefs, and actually that often gets in the way of so many conversations. So I don't know whether you call those emotions or not, but I think you have to unpick those, because they can be a huge barrier in so many situations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you. All right, one more contribution from one other person, and then we better start to wrap up. A few people have had to drop off, which is fine. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the list that I built up was about having a strong rapport, the listening skills, exactly as just been said, non-judgmental, powerful questioning, confidentiality, safe space, collaborative, intuitive, positive, creative, innovative, much the same thing, high integrity, and really just a catalyst for change. I think that's probably the best one to actually finish on. A coaching conversation should be a catalyst for change. So I think we better stop, because it's such a big conversation that we can have, and I really hope that as much as anything with these forums, we want the debate and the discussion around it. But I think it's recognising that a coaching conversation is an approach to a conversation, and the skills that you need for that. So I hope you found that useful. Please, we can send the slides around afterwards, but connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to. I'd say I do working as coach and training coaching skills in organisations. So happy to help if I can. So Jo, back to you.
Okay, thanks very much everybody for attending. I really appreciate it, and a massive thanks to Marion for helping to facilitate the session. I will send out an email to everybody this afternoon. I'll be putting a post on LinkedIn, so if you could put a comment on the post, I'd really appreciate it. Next week, we're running a webinar on Tuesday, and I will put a link in the email about mental health awareness. So if anybody wants to sign into that, then please feel free. I did put on the email as well yesterday. We've got a Guild app that we've recently launched. There's quite a few of you who've already joined, but if you haven't and you would like to join, then please again feel free. It's been really successful as a networking tool, and it's really for everybody. It's all the HR professionals asking questions and sort of sharing advice. So I will send that out this afternoon. But yeah, just like to say thanks again, everybody, and hope you've enjoyed the session.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.